Donkey Kong Bananza is a crazy punchin' fun time on the Nintendo Switch 2. Of course, the original 1981 arcade game about Donkey Kong was a little bit different from this. But I thought to myself, what if Donkey Kong Bananza were made back in the 80s? What would that game have looked like? So I made a bunch of sprites, made a bunch of animations, I put them together so we could see what it could have looked like. Buckle up, it's pixel time. Hey guys, I'm Andrew Robinson of Robinson Pixels. Let's go ahead and kick this thing off in Layer 1, Character Designs. Now the first step is going to be gathering references. What I'm going to do is pull sprites from the original Donkey Kong game, Donkey Kong Jr., Donkey Kong 3. Once I was kind of familiar with the way that the designs worked in the original games, it's time to look at what DK looks like now. A pretty big departure from what we had originally. The things that really stand out to me are these big old forearms. Of course, he's also got some pants and suspenders here. He doesn't necessarily wear them through the whole game in the real game, but I like them, so we're going to be sticking with that. Now to actually draw him in, I'm using a process called pixel sketching. It's just where you use a low opacity paintbrush and kind of draw over and over so you can get the idea of what your character looks like before you really commit to going through and adding in details. The next step is to actually outline and color in that character. But he won't actually even have outlines in the game, really, because the game uses these solid black backgrounds. At least the original arcade game did, and that's what I'm going for, is that same aesthetic. As for the colors themselves, I'm just taking those from different existing sprites that were in the original game, including from this guy. He is Stanley the Bugman, or Stanley the Exterminator. He's actually the playable character in Donkey Kong 3. I actually needed him for a reference. In the original Donkey Kong game, characters were built from different 16 by 16 pixel tiles, and each one of those tiles had a limit of 3 different colors. So if you look at these sprites of Donkey Kong, he's actually got this like brown with the orange outline, and then his foot is that more flesh tone color. But up here on his head, you've got white, that flesh tone color, and then brown there as well. You don't have the orange outline, and that's because that white is using up that extra color. Now with Stanley, you would think that they're cheating that, because he's got more than 3 colors within a 16 by 16 area. But how did they do this? And the answer is like this. They take different sprites and they stack them on top of each other so they could go over the original color limits. So what we're gonna do is pretend that my sprites of Donkey Kong here are using a similar structure here. We're gonna say that I'm stacking different tiles on top of each other, even though I wasn't actually paying that much attention to that component. But let's move on to our next character, which is Pauline. So I did some little pixel sketching and then just drew her in real fast. You'll notice some ground tiles pop in under Donkey Kong here in a sec, and that's because I had drawn everything out of order, but I want to keep everything grouped together while we're talking. So let's go ahead and pop into the next character, which is gonna be Void Kong. Now Void Kong is actually like one of the main antagonists from Donkey Kong Bananza, so I wanted to use him here. And plus I thought it would be kind of funny to have like a really small villain compared to Donkey Kong. You know, we got this big old juggernaut muscle guy versus this little bitty guy that he's got to get a hold of. The hardest part was actually getting him to be like really readable at this size, especially with a limited color palette. But you know, I think that it turned out pretty good. He could be like, I don't know, dancing around while DK's trying to get to him. Let's go ahead and pull up these last 2 characters that I did. First one was this weird little drill mole monster thing. Took me a while to kind of interpret the version from the game into something that I would like that kind of looked like an arcade character, but I think this looks pretty good. The little squid was a lot easier to draw, just because the shapes don't matter super much with little squid monsters. He's green right here, but I'll switch him over to like a pinkish color later. But now that we've got our main cast of characters here, let's actually see where they would be in Layer 2, World Design. Of course, you saw the tiles on that last screen, but I wanted to make sure that I talked about them right here. Each tile is just 8 by 8 pixels, and I wanted to make sure that they were very easily repeatable. And then this steel beam right here is just one that I took directly from the original game and recolored. Now, the goal of the original Donkey Kong game was for you as Mario to climb up a tower to get to Pauline. The goal in Bananza is for you and Pauline to go down to the center of the planet. I think that's a fun little juxtaposition there. So So I took a full screen picture from that original game. They've got like a life count up at the top and the level count and a bonus thing. I'm gonna move them all way down here. I want DK to start up here and work his way down, and I didn't want half the screen to already be taken up with all of those extra elements there. After that, I actually started just throwing on the tiles to see what this could look like. Threw in some bananas and some gold nuggets. Now the idea is that through the gameplay, you would be collecting these gold nuggets to increase your score. Bananas would be worth more, and they'd also be required for each level. And those I didn't draw, I just took that directly from Donkey Kong 3. But I did do a lot of animations for Donkey Kong himself, which is what I'm really excited to show you. So let's go ahead and dive into Layer 3, Animations. All right, now I'm not gonna show you like a time lapse for each of the drawings of the animations because when I'm animating, I'm flipping back and forth so fast that it's not like fun to watch back. It's very confusing. So what I'm gonna do is just kind of break down what each of them are, and then I'll show you what it looks like, and we'll do a couple of little time lapses where it's reasonable. Now the first sprite is actually gonna be based on Donkey Kong going down. Now, in the original game, he's actually punching like super hardcore into the ground. I figured since this is an arcade game, it would be a lot more subdued than that. But while I've got this sprite up here, I do want you to look at his mouth. Big, angry, cranky mouth, and I still wanted some of that rage. So I went to that original Donkey Kong sprite, and you see his like ridiculous mouth that he has here. I love that. I think that's an iconic part of the character, and this is where I ended up. We've got our cranky Donkey Kong here with his goofy looking teeth. So let's see all that in action. And so, yeah, he just like punches right down through the ground, right? I think it flows pretty well. Of course, he's not always gonna be just going downward through the whole thing. He's also gonna need to be able to go horizontally. So let's look at that. This is my first attempt at what a punch would look like. At the time, I thought that it was like really solid, right? But there is one major problem with it. Let's compare it to Donkey Kong in Super Smash Bros. Right here. Now, aside from the graphical difference, did you see the main difference between the two? It's the legs. You see, in my punch, his far arm is punching forward and his far leg is forward as well. In this one, you can see far arm is punching, the leg that's closer to the camera is forward. And plus, the other reason is that I need DK to be going forward as you punch your way through the walls. If he's moving right arm, right leg, left arm, left leg the whole time, he's gonna look like a goof. So let's fix it right here. This is much better. So we've got that alternating motion going along. That's right, these sprites are silly. So let's watch it. All right, now Bananza does have like a two-player mode where player 2 can play as Pauline and just kind of wreck shit everywhere by yelling the whole time. Actually, her yells shoot words as she does it, and it can destroy walls and enemies and everything in sight. So let's do that. DK is actually gonna crouch for this action, so that way he can get out of Pauline's way and allow her to do her thing. And it was important too for me to make sure that he stayed within that same 4-tile wide area. And that's important because you don't want him to go through any walls that he's right beside. So let's check that all out. Yeah, ha, yeah, yeah, ha, yeah. That's how that could work in theory. Maybe this could be used to shoot between steel beams. Like if I had drawn a steel beam up here too, maybe it could shoot just straight through the gap. Like maybe DK can't punch his way through the steel, so that's the way that you could hit enemies that are a little bit harder to get to. Something like that. All right, now let's do a bunch of moves together. First up is gonna be walking. This is Mario's sprites from the game. He only used 2, and that works in a lot of games. You can do that, but I figured that the larger a character is, the more frames you might want them to have so that it looks a little bit less awkward. So this is where I ended up with DK. He's got his one arm forward as he's going. You get this middle frame, and the reason that you do a frame like this is you can use that one in between. So I only posted the 3, but realistically that middle one would also go at the end for a full 4 sprite loop. Even with as few details as Pauline has, I had her alternate her body a little bit so her shoulders move as DK moves, because his body, his torso is like rotating during that movement. Next move would be this upward punch. And the idea of it is that you would be able to use this punch to kind of punch your way upward through the level in the game and bust tiles and bust enemies or whatever. But in addition to working his way upward to climb, he would also need to actually just regular climb. And if this looks a little bit familiar to you, that's because I cheated. I just took his sprite from his crouch from before and rotated that up. I did modify it a little bit, so this arm goes a little bit more forward, and then during the other frame, the other arm goes forward, so he does have some level of movement. All right, let's see all of that stuff we just did together. Yeah, walk in, punch, 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 and then bow, 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 and then climb it, and then bow, 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 bow. Yeah, I think this would be a fun game. It looks like, to me, it's like a fun little gameplay loop. Yeah, so now if this were a real game, I mentioned you'd be collecting those bananas, and I think that would be important. I think that would be like required. So Void Kong is maybe like locked in a little steel cage and you can't get to him until you collect all the bananas, and that'll help you transform, which we're gonna cover in Layer 4. Let's go, Bananza! Now in the real game, Donkey Kong has all of these different crazy Bananza forms that he can take on. I'm just gonna be focusing on this very first one, which is just like a big monkey. So I used elements from that original Donkey Kong game sprite here. I just felt like that was a really fun way to kind of tie together the old and new styles. One of my favorite things that I did is actually I took his like crazy grin and I just used those exact teeth and flipped them upside down right here. So he looks a little wild. And then I worked on finding some new colors for him. Now, of course, in order for him to become this big Bananza form, he's got to actually transform, and that was probably one of the laziest things that I did for the video. Ignore the fact that Pauline disappeared. She was on a separate layer. But I literally just took his sprites, squashed them, and stretched them. And the idea being that this will happen pretty fast in gameplay, so you won't notice that I'm just doing that without actually doing any actual like hard work on it. So let's see what that would look like. Yeah, that works. There he goes. Okay, it's time for his final smash. And by that, it's just he's gonna punch one more time. I used some different references on here. Of course, I have his punching sprite that I made earlier, and plus we've got this one here. And I just used those as the guides to draw it again. Now, I didn't just take that original sprite and resize it because a lot of the proportions are different. Like in my version here, his forearm, of course, is really big because that's what I want the character to have. But the rest of his arm is larger, especially like in this DK sprite. You can see he's just got real bulky arms. So I figured it'd be easier just to do the whole thing again from scratch. And drew him right on in, yeah. And here we have him. Oh, what am I doing? So stupid. Okay, let me show you him punching. Oh, bam, bam, yeah. Here it is again. Bam, bam, yeah. So the idea is you would punch out just the crap out of everything, and when you do that, when you punch into Void Kong's ground, it would destroy what he's standing on as well, and that'll move him down to the next stage, and then you would like chase him down until you get to like the core or of the planet or whatever the end game of this little fake game would be. I had a lot of fun making all this, so let's watch it all again in one little recap thing. Bananza! Pow, pow, pow! Pow, 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 pow! Yeah! Hey! Yeah! Ow! Pow, 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 pow! Ouch! Yummy! Pow, pow, pow! Pow, pow, pow! Pow, 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 pow! Bananza! Pow, pow! Ow! And that's it. I do a lot of different studies on this channel of a lot of different games. Most recently, I actually I drew Superman in the style of the Balatro card game. I thought that was like a pretty fun little challenge. So if you want to know about how to do that kind of art, check out this video right over here and follow along for more pixel practice. What if banana? Let's go and get. You know, I made 163 frames on this thing for this animation.